Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing The Big Bang Theory, created by Chuck Lorre and Bill Prady. The series premiered on CBS on September 24th, 2007. It ran for 12 seasons with a total of 279 episodes, the last of which aired on May 16th, 2019. So this show is officially the longest-running multi-camera sitcom in history. The previous one was Cheers, with 275 episodes. And this show is just such a huge hit, but what's really cool is that it's had a lot of really unique accomplishments throughout the years. One of which is that in the fall of 2015, there was a scholarship established called the Big Bang Theory Scholarship, and this scholarship supports UCLA undergraduate students who are majoring in the STEM fields. That's, of course, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Another really cool accomplishment was that earlier this year, Stage 25 on the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank, which is where the show was filmed, was renamed the Big Bang Theory stage. And that is the fifth show in the lot's history to receive that honor. The other shows are Friends, ER, 2.5 Men, and The Ellen DeGeneres Show. Also, on May 1st of this year, the cast of The Big Bang Theory cemented their handprints at the famous TCL Chinese Theater in Hollywood. And that is the first TV series to receive that honor. And I first started watching this show back in 2012. And that was when it went into syndication and TBS started airing the show. And I had heard of the series. I didn't really know much about it. I knew it was about nerds. And that was pretty much it. I was like, oh, nerdy characters. And the first thing I ever saw of this show, actually, was maybe not even a year. I don't know. I don't remember when exactly. But the first thing I saw of this show was actually a clip on YouTube. And it was a scene that is actually, in fact, one of the most iconic scenes in the show from the episode The Bath Item Gift Hypothesis from season 2. And the clip I had watched was one of those clips where someone edited it to remove all the laughter. It's like Big Bang Theory without the laugh track. Even though it's not a laugh track, it is, of course, a real live studio audience. I was lucky enough to have attended a taping earlier this year, which I will, of course, get into. But, so the clip I saw was, of course, the scene when Penny gives Sheldon the napkin that was signed by Leonard Nimoy, and then Sheldon's freaking out, saying, I possess the DNA of Leonard Nimoy? Do you realize what this means? All I need is a healthy ovum and I can grow my own Leonard Nimoy. And then he gives Penny all those gifts. He's like, I know it's not enough. Here, and he hugs her. So that was the first thing I had ever seen of the show, and it was just without the laugh track, all that nonsense. And when I first started watching it on TV, my first impression of it was that it's kind of typical sitcom scenarios. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean, alright, it's a sitcom. Nothing particularly out of the ordinary in that sense, in terms of the situations and the conflicts. But what I liked about it was the dialogue, and I liked how it was from the perspective of these characters who are nerdy, who are extremely intelligent. And of course, the premise for the show is about, with the first episode, when Penny moves in, and it's those worlds colliding with these really intelligent characters, Leonard and Sheldon, but they are socially inept. Whereas you have Penny, who is this outgoing young woman trying to become a famous movie star or TV actress, just working at the Cheesecake Factory trying to make a name for herself. And Penny learning about these geeky guys and vice versa. And of course, Leonard immediately falls for her, and you have that classic line at the end of the pilot where he says, our babies will be smart and beautiful, and Sheldon says, not to mention imaginary. And no one would have ever predicted that this show would be such a colossal hit. Because in fact, when this show first filmed its pilot, it had a lot of retooling to do. Because first there was a character named Katie, and they didn't have Raj and Howard yet. And then when that failed with audiences, they had an opportunity to shoot the pilot again and rework the characters and all of that. And as I mentioned, this show is created by Chuck Lorre and Bill Prady. And Bill Prady had said that his inspiration for this show came from his own experiences working with computers and knowing people like this who are into technology and science and were perhaps a little socially awkward, but were passionate about what they do and, of course, extremely intelligent. And then Chuck Lorre, of course, he's created so many hit sitcoms. He's written for Roseanne. He created the show Dharma and Greg. He co-created 2.5 Men. He now works on the show The Kominsky Method. That's on Netflix. Many other shows, but that's just to name a few. Also, Mom is another one. That show's still going. So he's been in the business a long time. So let's go ahead and start talking about some specifics. First off, I gotta mention the theme song by Bare Naked Ladies. You know, it's been 1 week since you looked at me, those guys. That's the song 1 week. But the theme song is great, that they wrote themselves. And there is an extended version of the theme song too, but the actual theme song, it's roughly 15 seconds or so. They pack a lot in there, summing up the whole universe. What's also really cool was that this show had a number of flash mobs. The first one was in 2012 to the song Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen. I think there were a few other songs, but that was the main one. Then they did one again in 2014 to Uptown Funk. It may have been 2013. I can't recall off the top of my head, but these are all available on YouTube. You could find clips to these flash mobs. But so that was for Uptown Funk and a few other songs, but then the most recent one was earlier this year. As a dedication to the fans, they danced to Larger Than Life by the Backstreet Boys. And that one, watching that, made me emotional. First off, because of the song, just brings me back to the late 90s, and I love the Backstreet Boys. My favorite boy band by far. But also, that's just sweet that they all got together, the cast and the crew, and it was a love letter to the fans and also to the writers. And then I know for a fact earlier this year, the writers were saying, oh, maybe we'll try to do a flash mob to surprise them, but then it wasn't exactly working out, so they just did away with that plan. And what's also interesting about this show, since of course talks a lot about science, now it's part of the dialogue, especially in the earlier seasons. They had a science consultant named David Saltzberg. He is a UCLA professor, physics professor. So he would actually be a source for the writers to help make sure the science is accurate. And also there have been a lot of guest stars throughout the years on this show, just to name a few. Bill Nye, Neil deGrasse Tyson, James Earl Jones, Bill Gates, Adam West, Carrie Fisher, Stephen Hawking, William Shatner, Mark Hamill, Kevin Smith, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Joe Manganiello, and of course Will Wheaton. He was a great recurring character, first started out evil and then just became a friend to all of them. And it's just cool to have a show celebrating science and representing nerds and geeks, not in a disparaging way by any means. Even though there have been critics saying, oh, it's making fun of nerds, or oh, it's just like referencing things like Star Trek and Star Wars. Well, that's not really jokes, that's just making references. But I see it as the writers being passionate about that kind of stuff and then putting that into the stories. that these characters love all this stuff. And to not be ashamed of things that you're really passionate about. But of course, the main pull of the show early on was Leonard's love for Penny. And it was the girl next door, and a girl that he always thought was out of his league, but he was just hopelessly in love with her. And then he'd watch her date these jerky guys, hoping that someday he would have a chance with her. And one of the episodes I really loved from season 1 was actually the season 1 finale, The Tangerine Factor. And one scene I love in particular was when Sheldon was inside Penny's apartment and she's talking to him about how she's nervous about going on a date with Leonard, because that's when Leonard had finally asked her out. And as she's talking about all that, Sheldon, in all his neuroses, he's walking around the room trying to find a specific place to sit, since of course in his apartment with Leonard he's got his spot that no one else can sit in, his precious spot on the couch. Like, get out of my spot, always his spot. No one else is allowed to sit there. So I found that really unique. And then of course the whole metaphor with Schrodinger's cat. So it's cool how the show helped popularize that. And Schrodinger's cat, it's basically you put a cat in a box with the poison in it, and the cat is both alive and dead. It can either be alive and dead simultaneously until you open the box and find out. So he made that a metaphor for Leonard and Penny's relationship. That until they actually go out, it could either work or not work. And Leonard, Sheldon, Howard, and Raj, the 4 of them work at Caltech. Leonard is an experimental physicist, Sheldon a theoretical physicist, Raj an astrophysicist, and Howard an engineer. So Sheldon would of course tease him about that he doesn't even have his PhD. Anything to boast his superiority over every little thing. But since he doesn't understand social cues, in one episode in season 2, the friendship algorithm, he literally comes up with a formula to make new friends. And then he tries to become friends with one of his nemeses, Barry Kripke, played by John Ross Bowie. And then he keeps going back to the drawing board. Oh, tell me another interest of yours. Oh, tell me another one. And then he finally settles on rock climbing. And then he just ends up passing out. And that's just so funny, him dangling. Poor Sheldon. But a great little bottle episode from season 2. It's called The Work Song Nanocluster. That's the one where Penny makes those little hair berets called penny blossoms with the little flowers on them. And then Sheldon gets involved in helping her, and then the guys help her. And a bottle episode, if you're unfamiliar with that term, it's just when, due to budget restraints, basically, that for an episode, they just use the main sets and the main actors. So in other words, to save money, it's an episode where there's no extra sets that need to be built and no extra actors. So in this case, it all takes place in Penny's apartment and then Leonard and Sheldon's apartment. And just all of them working together, helping Penny make her little penny blossoms. And then when they get this huge shipment order, they need to stay up all night to make more. And they give Sheldon coffee. He's like, oh, I'm not going to have drugs. But then, of course, when he has coffee, he's just off the wall with caffeine and he just passes out. And then the season 2 finale is a great one, the Monopolar Expedition, with the guy is getting ready to leave for the summer to conduct all these tests for the university. And then Penny mentions how she'll miss Leonard, and they hug for a really long time. And then Leonard's just overthinking everything, wondering if he should stay. And then Leonard finally talks to Penny, needing to understand what she meant by everything. And he says, "What did you mean when you said you were going to miss me?" And she says, "I don't know. You'll be gone and I'll notice." "Okay, well, what about this? What does this mean?" And he's talking about the Snuggie that she gave him. And she says, "Wine, a credit card, and late night television are a bad combination." And then he says, "What about that really long hug? What did that mean?" "That wasn't a really long hug. It was at least 5 Mississippis. A standard hug is 2 Mississippis, tops." And she's saying, "Well, it's just a hug." And then after he leaves, she says, "It means I wish you weren't going." I really like that moment. And apparently an earlier line in the script was that after he left, she said it was 6 Mississippis, but I think this line's much better. And then, of course, in the season 3 premiere, they finally get together. She kisses him and excited to see him, and they're finally going to give this a shot, them being a couple. And in real life at the time, that was when Kaley Cuoco and Johnny Galecki were in fact dating. They had dated for a couple years, and they basically had kept it under wraps until after they had broken up. So that's a unique thing where they had to obviously put all that aside because they had to keep working together. And they're, of course, they're great friends, and that's always nice that they have a real meaningful friendship for life, as with all these actors, but that's nice. So that season 3 premiere, the electric can opener fluctuation, another just hilarious scene I like in that episode was when Sheldon finds out that they used a can opener to just pretend like he got results. And then Howard says, "Sheldon, you remember the first few weeks we were looking for magnetic monopoles and not finding anything, and you were acting like an obnoxious giant dictator?" And Raj says, "I thought we were going to be gentle with him." And Howard says, "That's why I added the tater." I thought that was just so clever when I first saw that. I thought that was great. And then another classic episode from season 3, definitely another favorite of mine, the adhesive duct deficiency. And both plots are great. The A story with Penny falling in the shower, dislocating her shoulder, Sheldon having to take her to the hospital. And then the B story with Leonard, Raj, and Howard accidentally getting stoned after they have these cookies from some hippie teachers, and they were there to watch the meteor shower and then just get stoned and just are saying ridiculous, dumb things. But my favorite scene in that episode is the scene in the hospital. Sheldon saying, "Oh, we have to fill out these forms." So here's the whole exchange. "Describe illness or injury." "I dislocated my shoulder." "All right. And how did the accident occur?" "You already know that." "Cause of accident, lack of adhesive ducts." "Okay, medical history. Have you been diagnosed with diabetes?" "No." "Kidney disease?" "No." "Migraines?" "Getting one." "Are you currently pregnant?" "No." "Are you sure? You look a bit puffy." "Change migraine to yes." "When was your last menstrual period?" "Oh, next question." I'll put "in progress." "Okay, moving to psychiatric disorders. List all major behavioral diagnoses, e.g. depression, anxiety, etc. What the hell does that have to do with my stupid shoulder?" "Episodes of subpsychotic rage." "Ass." "Possible Tourette's." "All right, moles, lesions, or other skin conditions." "Soup tattoo on right buttock." "Okay, Sheldon, look, I am scared and in a lot of pain. Could you please take a break from being you for just a minute and try being, I don't know, comforting?" "I'm sorry." They're there. Everything's going to be fine. Sheldon's here. And of course he's doing that ridiculous, awkward, forced smile. And it's so not pleasant. It's just so not comforting whatsoever. Poor Penny, she says, thanks, that's much better. And then when she's drugged on painkillers in the end, she's saying, oh, Sheldon has to put me to bed. Bet you never thought I'd say that. And then she says, sing Soft Kitty to me. And of course, Soft Kitty, that's a recurring thing throughout the show here and there. It was first from Sheldon's mom, Mary Cooper, played by Lorre Metcalf. And it's just a song she sang to him whenever he was sick. The song is just so cute. Soft kitty, warm kitty, little ball of fur. Happy kitty, sleepy kitty, purr, purr, purr. And there was apparently a whole lawsuit against the show with this song, but that was dissolved in the end. It was dismissed in the end. But the original version of this song, it's actually a Polish traditional lullaby. It's a folk tune from the 18th century. But that's cute when they sing it together. She's like, oh, let's sing it as a round. They sing it. So I really like their friendship, Sheldon and Penny. And apparently, I know there are people who shipped them. I never, ever, ever saw it that way. I always saw it as Penny as a motherly figure to Sheldon. And Sheldon never saw Penny that way, in a romantic way at all. He never really saw anyone that way, for that matter, until Amy Farrah Fowler came along. But I'll get there. Another season 3 episode I like, though, with Sheldon and Penny, the gorilla experiment, when he's trying to teach her about what Leonard does with his experimental physics. And then there's a part where she's crying, getting so upset because she just can't understand everything that he's trying to explain to her. And then Sheldon says, why are you crying? Because I'm stupid. Well, that's no reason to cry. No, one cries because one is sad. For example, I cry because others are stupid and it makes me sad. That's great. Oh my goodness. Another great episode is, of course, the staircase implementation. When you find out that Sheldon and the guys are responsible for the broken elevator. That's, of course, a specific element to the show, because the writers had said that they needed the characters to walk and talk. And they had tried exterior sets, apparently, but it just wasn't working. So then they had dug a hole within the stage, and then that's what they did. They had the staircase. Well, just the elevator's broken. That was the explanation throughout all these years until, we'll get to it, but until the end of the show. But another season 3 episode I like is the maternal congruence, featuring, of course, Beverly Hofstetter, Leonard's mother, played by Christine Baranski. She's such a hilarious character. What's interesting, too, is that Leonard never felt unconditional love from his mother. He always felt that she was just using him as an experiment and was just always cold and not the mother he ever wanted. And the irony is that Sheldon gets along so well with Beverly, whereas his own mother is the kind of mother that Leonard wants. The kind of mother who's just so loving and so doting on him. Even though the irony, though, for Sheldon is that she is extremely religious. So they both kind of have different appreciation for each other's mothers. But in that episode, when Penny and Beverly are out getting drunk together, and then Penny says, hey, Bev, guess what? I'm sleeping with your son. Really? Which one? The one from whom I live across the hall from? Oh, well, that's convenient. And then, of course, after they go back to Sheldon and Leonard's apartment, and Beverly's saying, oh, how could you have kept this from me, that you were going out with this woman, like my homegirl, because they had bonded at that point, getting drunk together, Penny and Beverly. And then she gives Leonard a hug, and she's saying, now go to bed, and he just walks away, like, so confused. And then Sheldon walks in, and he says, why is Leonard softly banging his head against his bedroom door? And then Beverly says, speaking of warm feelings, come here. And she just full on kisses him. And then she just says, no, I'd rather have the busboy. So I guess technically that was Sheldon's first kiss, but with your best friend's mother. And then they're just like, well, it's best you not know. And Leonard's like, they're all saying agreed. And then Leonard's like, what the hell, agreed. Like, clearly it's better. He never found out about that. But then, of course, fast forwarding to the season 3 finale, where we meet Amy Farrah Fowler. And of course, they had mentioned Mayim Bialik in a season 1 episode, saying, oh, she got the girl from Blossom to be on their physics bowl team. And at this point, Penny and Leonard had broken up because evil Will Wheaton had gotten into Penny's head, basically, and she realized she wasn't ready to say I love you to Leonard, because he had said it first to her, and things were moving too fast for her, so they broke up. Then there's that episode where they're basically splitting time, sharing Sheldon as if Sheldon is their kid. And, like, they just split up, and it's like, oh, we gotta still each have custody of Sheldon, kind of like that. Teasing how he's kind of like their kid. But in the season 3 finale, Raj and Howard decide to sign Sheldon up for online dating. And they answer the questions all how he would answer them. And they get him to go on the date by saying that they hid a dirty sock in the apartment. And he's saying, oh, you're bluffing. But he's not willing to risk it. So then he decides to go on a date to meet Amy. And of course, when Amy's first introduced, she, as Mayim Bialik has said, that they wanted a female Sheldon Cooper. So she's very robotic, very much like the way Sheldon is in these earlier seasons. But anyway, so the whole exchange where they first meet, I just love it. It's so cute. Excuse me, I'm Amy Farrah Fowler, you're Sheldon Cooper. Hello, Amy Farrah Fowler. I'm sorry to inform you that you have been taken in by unsupportable mathematics designed to prey on the gullible and the lonely. Additionally, I'm being blackmailed with a hidden dirty sock. If that was slang, I'm unfamiliar with it. If it was literal, I share your aversion to soiled hosiery. I'm here because my mother and I have agreed that I will date at least once a year. Interesting. My mother and I have the same agreement about church. I don't object to the concept of a deity, but I'm baffled by the notion of one that takes attendance. Well, then you might want to avoid East Texas. Noted. Now, before this goes any further, you should know that all forms of physical contact up to including coitus are off the table. May I buy you a beverage? Tepid water, please. And they go up to the counter together, both put their arms up at the same time, and then Howard just says, good God, what have we done? So a big reason that I got into this show was for the shamey, as they're introduced in season 4 premiere, the robotic manipulation, or as we like to call them, shamey. So the show gave us the shamey, but I just really became invested in their relationship. That's my favorite relationship in this show, Sheldon and Amy. And I was excited for each milestone. Like, oh, when's Sheldon finally going to kiss Amy? When are they going to move in together? When are they going to sleep together? When are they going to get engaged? When are they going to say I love you? All that stuff. And of course, the writers always described how their relationship moves like molasses, very, very slowly. And that's the kind of character Sheldon is, that he has a huge aversion to change. So it's a matter of baby steps for him and growing and evolving in this relationship with Amy, and the two of them growing and evolving together. And then in that season 4 episode, a little early on in the season 2, when they break up, even though they're not officially dating or anything, but they're seeing each other, because of course Sheldon makes it clear, yes, she is a girl, yes, she is my friend, but she is not my girlfriend. But then they do go on a first date together in that season 4 premiere, and Penny agrees to drive him, and then she's just sitting there, eating with them, saying like, oh, trying to push the conversation along and all that. Say like, oh, how many romantic partners have you had? Like, all that stuff. But in the season 4 episode, when they basically go their separate ways. And then Sheldon gets a whole bunch of cats to fill the emotional void. In the Zazzy substitution, it's like, oh, this one's so zazzy. All the kitties, so cute. It's like, oh, it's a clouder or a glaring. You might want to learn that considering we have one, as in a glaring or a clouder of cats. That's a group of cats. That's the plural term for it, evidently. Then Mary's saying how, oh, you got a bunch of cats, gave them cute little Jewish names. We can call it what I want, but I think we can all agree it's creepy. Then she's saying, well, I'm sorry, Shelley, I don't see it. I don't think you two should see each other anymore. And then Sheldon says, Amy, after consideration, I believe we may have acted rashly. I propose we resume our relationship and attempt to resolve our differences. I'll agree to that only if you'll stipulate that 80% of our difficulties were caused by you. I'll go as high as 40, 65, done. You understand that moving forward we deal with the fact that my mother does not approve of you? I do. I find being cast in the role of bad girl oddly titillating. Would you like to see my cats? I would. I love cats. They're the epitome of indifference. Ah, then you may find Zazzles a little cloying. And then Mary's saying, oh, you give him like any man. You tell him not to do something, that's the one thing he wants to do. And then she's saying, now don't you move. I'll go bring you all the food. It's like, no, I can get it. Well, isn't that nice? To Leonard. Mary's very clever. So Amy, too, her character changed a lot. She was more like Sheldon early on. Then as her character evolved from a female Sheldon to her own character, we find out she is a neurobiologist. And then, of course, she becomes fascinated with Penny, and Penny being her bestie, and how she just never had any friends growing up. She never dated or anything like that. So she's a late bloomer in that regard. And I realized she kind of vaguely reminds me of a grown Tina Belcher from Bob's Burgers. Maybe not as obsessed with butts the way Tina is, but just a little. I just get that vibe from Amy. And then, of course, there's the episode, The Desperation Emanation, when she wants to introduce Sheldon to her mother, and then Sheldon's freaking out, and then he says, I don't want to be joined to another object by an inclined plane wrapped helically around an axis. In what way are you screwed? All I wanted to do is present you as my boyfriend to my mother so she'll be satisfied that I'm in a relationship. So we'd be perpetrating a ruse? Precisely. And you haven't fallen hopelessly in love with me? Don't be absurd. I find the notion of romantic love to be an unnecessary cultural construct that adds no value to human relationships. Amy Farrah Fowler, that's the most pragmatic thing anyone has ever said to me. I trust this clarification allows us to return to boy/friend/girl/friend status. Of course. Would you like to join me for Chinese food? Sheldon, please, you're suffocating me. My apologies. Good night, Amy. Good night, Sheldon. So Amy's character really did change a lot from these earlier seasons. And that's as she became more sociable and got more comfortable with this group, with all these characters. And then, of course, all the girls' nights that they did. Like in the season 4 episode also, the 21-second excitation, when the guys are off going to watch Indiana Jones with 21 extra seconds of material, and then the girls are having a sleepover. And Amy's saying how she never had a sleepover before. And then she's smacks Penny with a pillow fight, like doing all this stuff because she's never experienced it before. And they play Truth or Dare, and she's saying, hang on, I'm familiarizing myself with the rules. And she just asks Bernadette, like, oh, to what temperature do you heat, whatever she says. She's saying, no, Amy, just ask her something embarrassing, so like all that stuff. Oh, okay, what is the circumference of your areolas? Like, oh my goodness. Another great Amy episode is the alien parasite hypothesis, when she is physically attracted to Penny's ex-boyfriend, Zach. Zach is so great. He's so hilarious. Oh my goodness. Played by Brian Thomas Smith. And then Sheldon is saying, go, Amy, follow your endocrine systems. Then she goes up to Zach and she says, I have spent my life in pursuit of pure knowledge. Until I met you, my decisions were founded in logic and reason. And yet here I stand before you, longing to grab hold of your gluteus maximus and make Shakespeare's metaphorical beast with two backs. My gluteus what? On the other hand, as I look at that blank, ape-like expression on your face, I have decided to adopt the Vulcan practice of Kolinar. Goodbye, Zach. Bye. And he just shakes her hand. She's like, ooh, that should hold me for a while. But while I mentioned Zach, also the episode, The Toast Derivation, one of my favorite Zach lines, when Sheldon has he has other people over. He has Zach over, Stewart. Didn't mention Stewart yet, the comic book store owner, Stewart, of course, played by Kevin Sussman. And he has also over Kripke. And then Zach is telling him a story. And then talking about he mentions a hot tub. And then Sheldon says, oh, the water level rose. It's like, really? That's what you care about? Like in this story? And it's like, was it a jacuzzi or a hot tub? It's like, and then he's explaining, hot tub is a generic term, i.e. all jacuzzis are hot tubs, but not all hot tubs are jacuzzis. And then Zach says, is that like all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs? Surprisingly, yes. Nice. Now, what exactly are toes? I love that. Like, poor Zach, he's just so dumb, but he wants to learn, he wants to learn about science and all that from the guys, so it's sweet in an odd way. But a great ensemble episode that I really like is the love car displacement. That's when they go to the science conference and all that stuff with Bernadette and Howard arguing about her ex, and Leonard and Penny were going to hook up for a night, but then that falls through. And then Raj just wants to watch Bridget Jones' Diary, and then when he walks in, it's like, oh, hi, Leonard, Sheldon kicked me out, and then he's saying, Penny's here. And Raj, of course, a unique character trait about him is that in these early seasons, he has selective mutism, where he can't talk to women unless he's drunk. So then when he goes in the room, and then when Leonard says, Penny's here, and then he just whispers to Leonard. He's like, no, we don't want to watch Bridget Jones' Diary. It's just that whole episode. And then when they're at the conference and they're all just being petty, throwing all their quips at each other and all that. It's great. Another Sheldon and Amy episode I love, though, is the herb garden germination from season 4. That's when they decide to do a little experiment, seeing if they create this piece of gossip, how that will spread among the group. And then Sheldon says, look at you getting me to engage in the social sciences. You're a vixen, Amy Farrah Fowler. So then when Amy talking to Penny, and Penny says, oh, hey, Amy, what's up? Sheldon and I engaged in intercourse. In other news, I'm thinking of starting an herb garden, mum's the word. And of course, when Penny tells Raj later, and then he just says, shut your ass. That line's so great, too. And then, of course, when Sheldon and Amy finally kiss for the first time in the episode, The Agreement Dissection, just that whole scene where she's got that smoking monkey in her apartment. It's like, oh, someone's smoking? It's like, oh, that's just Ricky, the monkey. And she's saying, oh, you should play dirty. Because at that point, that was when Leonard was dating Raj's sister, Priya. And he's saying, oh, well, Priya took apart the roommate agreement, saying, oh, well, play dirty. It's like, dirty, 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 which brings me to our next order of business. And then she kisses him because they had been out drinking, so she was tipsy. And then he says, fascinating. And then she just gets up and gets sick from drinking too much. So all the milestones that I mentioned, that was just always things I was excited about and some of my personal favorite moments throughout the show. And then moving to season 5, an episode I like is the pulled groin extrapolation, when Amy and Leonard are bonding a little for the first time. And Amy invites Leonard to accompany her to a wedding. Because Sheldon, she's like, oh, well, he behaved like a child the whole time. And then she's like, oh, I got you a corsage to give to me. It's like, oh, Amy, this is for you. And then he's trying to pin it on her. And she's saying, when you're done cupping a feel, that goes on my wrist. And then at the end, when Leonard's saying, talking to Sheldon, and he says, I had a lot more fun with Amy than I thought I would. What exactly do you mean by that? Well, it turns out she really knows how to help a guy loosen up and have a good time. Although, truth be told, my groin's a little worse for wear. And then Sheldon karate chops him, and he's like, ow, what did you do that for? To send a message. She is not for you. What? Not for you. That's sort of a glimpse of jealous Sheldon there, which we didn't really see much. But that was when Sheldon and Amy weren't officially boyfriend and girlfriend, though. And then, of course, in season 5, that's when eventually Penny and Leonard get back together. But first, when they decide to just try going out with each other again in the episode, The Ornithophobia Diffusion, where they go on a date and Penny's saying, oh, I like take charge, Leonard. Or actually, they go on a non-date together. It's like, oh, well, just since this isn't a date, and they like kind of are trying to make the other jealous and all that with all that stuff. It's like, oh, well, since this isn't a date, you can pay for yourself and all that. And they're just trying to hang out as friends. And then the B story is Sheldon with a bird that comes into the apartment. He's trying to scare it away. He draws a picture of a cat. And he's like, oh, what am I thinking? Whiskers. And then when Bernadette and Amy come over to help, and then Bernadette takes the bird, he's saying, oh, now slowly and carefully flush him down the toilet. And then she's like, oh, just pet the bird, you big baby. He just pets it, like, barely. And then later, when all of a sudden, then he loves the bird. He's like, oh, it's such a great bird. And then he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even know if you were a beverage. And he's like, gives it water. He's like, oh, you're just my little lovey-dovey, aren't you? And then Amy says, guess you gotta have hollow bones to get some sugar around here. And then at the end, when Leonard comes home and he says, I had a weird night. Mine was great. I'm going to be a mommy. And Sheldon lifts the blanket to show an egg. Oh, goodness. And then earlier when he was like, oh, is this your bird? Not anymore. Oh, goodness. And then, of course, when Sheldon and Amy finally become official in the Flaming Spittoon acquisition, when Amy first went on a date with Stuart, and then Sheldon realizes that's the incentive for him to finally officially ask her out. And he says, with the understanding that nothing changes whatsoever, physical or otherwise, I would not object to us no longer categorizing you as not my girlfriend. Interesting. Now try it without the quadruple negative. You're being impossible. Hi, Stuart. Fine. Amy, will you be my girlfriend? Yes. Well, that's enough of that. And another iconic Amy scene is the shiny trinket maneuver, when Amy is upset with Sheldon that he didn't acknowledge her accomplishments at work. And then he makes it up to her by buying her jewelry. And she says, jewelry? Seriously? Sheldon, you are the most shallow, self-centered person I've ever met. Do you really think another transparently manipulative, oh, it's a tiara, I have a tiara, put it on me, put it on me, put it on me, put it on me. You look beautiful. Of course I do, I'm a princess, and this is my tiara. And she kisses Sheldon and hugs him, and he just says, you were right, tiara was too much, to Penny. She's just shrugging, but smiling. It's so cute. And the 100th episode is a great episode, too. The recombination hypothesis. The way it's framed, how it turns out to all be when Leonard asks Penny out spontaneously. It's like, oh, are you free for dinner tonight? Just the two of us. And, of course, it's a callback to the pilot where they're all wearing the outfits they first wore in that first episode. That light blue shirt for Penny and all that. And then it turns out, though, the whole thing was a daydream for Leonard. And then he asks her out again. It's like, when she says, did you think this through? It's like, yeah, and I think we should go anyway. But when they are on the date, and at one point when she says, bat signal, what are you, some kind of nerd? Not some kind of nerd, I'm the king of nerds. What does that mean? It means if anyone displeases me, I don't help them set up their printer. And then, of course, season 5 also introduced us to Fun with Flags. Dr. Shelton Cooper presents Fun with Flags, and Amy helping him out. And that was used throughout the show in several episodes as well. Like Penny teaching Sheldon to be more open. He's like, oh, I see. And then he's like, okay, you gotta be more open and relaxed. That's in season 6, in that episode. And then when he opens his legs, he's like, open your legs, invite them in. And then when there's an episode with Will Wheaton, and then there's a bunch with the Fun with Flags. But another season 5 episode I like is the Weekend Vortex. when Amy wanted Sheldon to come with her to her great aunt's great aunt's birthday, and then Sheldon says, I think I understand. You're the one person who can say Sheldon Cooper is your boyfriend, but that rings hollow if you can't lord him over others in the flesh. I forget what I bring to the party and what I take away from it when I leave. Please accept these valuable Sheldon Cooper coupons as restitution. Sheldon, she doesn't want your stupid, Science Center redeeming, let's go. Well played, Amy Farrah Fowler. Let me get my coat. And then there's that whip noise that was a gag throughout the episode. The phone app, like the whip, like he's whipped. And Sheldon says, grow up, Leonard. And then Raj says, excuse me, I have something to say. None of you may realize it, but I was very much looking forward to this weekend. It was going to be like the old days, the four of us hanging out, playing video games before you guys all got girlfriends. Do you have any idea what it's like to be the only one without a girlfriend? Even if I get one someday, I'll still be the guy who got a girl after Sheldon Cooper. And then Penny just says, that's how a girl makes a scene. Because Raj is the perpetual single guy throughout the series. He has had a few long-term relationships, though. There's Lucy, played by Kate Micucci in season 6. Then there's also Emily Sweeney, played by Laura Spencer. She's for a few seasons. And then in season 12, it's Anu, played by Radhi Gupta. Those are basically his 3 major relationships throughout the show. Personally, I think Lucy was a good relationship for him. And I know Kunal had said that he liked that relationship a lot. Because Lucy, though, she had social anxiety, so he was trying to help her draw her out of her shell and that. Whereas he, of course, was still struggling with talking to women, and he still couldn't talk to women without being drunk. So they're both kind of helping each other and get more comfortable in that regard. But another one that could have been good potential was, she was only in one episode and never heard from again, was Yvette the vet in the Valentine's episode from season 7, the locomotive manipulation. And Stuart, too, he was really unlucky in love throughout the show. He did go out with Penny once, too, and Amy, and he never really had a long-term girlfriend that we saw on the show until Denise came along. So it's nice that he found love and had a nice relationship by the end of the show. And Denise is played by Lauren Lapkus. Because they always painted Stuart as this loser, and they made him kind of creepy later on when he was living with Bernadette and Howard eventually. So I'm glad that all worked out for him, that he kind of grew up and he got a meaningful relationship and everything. So obviously for me, a lot of my favorite moments throughout the show are the romantic moments and are the moments with the relationships. But of course, all the friendship moments are really nice too. And all the more ensemble episodes too. But I also really like the season 5 finale, the countdown reflection, when Howard and Bernadette get married, and then Howard is going to go off to space. And then just that tag scene when they're watching Howard on TV, waiting for him to take off into space in the rocket, and they're all watching together. And then Bernadette says, I love that man. And Raj says, me too. And then Bernadette takes Raj's hand. And then Penny says, I can't believe it. This whole time, a small part of me thought he was lying. And then she takes Leonard's hand. And he says, this is it. And then Sheldon says, boldly go, Howard Wolowitz. And he takes Amy's hand. And she just stares at him for a second, just kind of in stunned silence. And they just all watch as the rocket takes off. And it's a sweet scene that's emotional, but not over the top emotional, just very sweet. Just this group of friends coming together, watching someone they care about make this huge life accomplishment, going off into space, and then sitting there with each other, Bernadette and Raj just holding hands, moral support, and then Penny and Leonard and Amy and Sheldon. It's just so sweet. And Sheldon, how he always made fun of hand-holding, how he doesn't like it, but then in that moment it's just like them reaching out for the person that they care about, holding their hand. It's just very sweet. Another great ensemble episode, though, from season 6 is the tenure turbulence. Is a fun one where they're all just competing with each other, wanting to get tenure, and that's Leonard, Sheldon, Raj, and Kripke. And though we never find out who got tenure, I mean, we were supposed to, but we never did. So in my mind, I always thought that Kripke, that just makes sense since it's outside the group, so maybe Kripke's the one who got tenure. But whatever, that one's just really funny. Another funny one is the Bakersfield expedition from season 6, and that is the guys going off to a fan convention dressed up like Star Trek characters, while the girls decide to read a comic book to see what's so great about them and try to take more of an interest in what the guys love. And then they get into a heated argument. First thing, oh, it's so stupid, blah, blah, blah. And then they get into a heated argument about Thor's hammer. And then at one point when Amy says, okay, if you're going to start comparing wands and hammers, can't even take you seriously. Her delivery of that is so funny. And then by the end, when Penny says, how could Red Hulk be worthy? And Bernadette says, you don't know his life. Her delivery of that is fantastic too. Because Bernadette, of course, she has that high-pitched, squeaky voice, but of course Melissa doesn't talk like that in real life, Melissa Rauch, but that's Bernadette's way of speaking, just that high-pitched, squeaky voice. I also like the fish guts displacement when Amy's pretending, first she's actually sick, and then she is just pretending she's sick because she likes Sheldon taking care of her, and at the end, Sheldon's saying, well, I need to discourage this behavior, so he decides to spank her. And at first they were going to do something where it was monkeys hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, so it was all going to be off screen. But then at the end they ended up actually filming at him spanking her. That must have been so awkward at the time, because those bloopers are so funny though, where Jim just couldn't keep it together and he just keeps laughing, like having to spank Mayim over and over. Oh my goodness. So that must have been like so awkward yet embarrassing, but funny though. But oh my goodness, that's crazy. But I also really like the Valentine's episode from that season, the tangible affection proof, where Leonard says to Penny, I know I propose a lot, so how about this? I promise I will never ask you to marry me again. And Penny says, what do you mean? Are you breaking up with me? No, if someday you decide you want to get married, you have to propose to me. Really? Yes, it's all on you. But I gotta tell you, when the time comes, I want the whole 9 yards. I want you down on one knee, flowers, I want to be swept off my feet. So I thought that was clever too. Like, oh, that's nice. Yeah, she'll have to propose to him because he had first proposed to her in bed. And that kind of became a little running gag. Like, oh, it's 2 for 2. Like, keeping tally of how many times they asked each other to marry each other. But also in that episode, when Amy suggests to Sheldon that her gift to him is that they don't do any of this romantic stuff. They don't go out and have a nice dinner. They just stay in and watch one of his Star Wars Trek things. And then Sheldon is so touched by that, and he gives her the gift that he has for her. And she's saying, Caltech employee information, and he says at the bottom, and she says, in case of emergency, please contact Amy Farrah Fowler, and there's my phone number. This is the most beautiful gift you could have ever given me. Well, I thought, if I have a stroke or a kidney stone, who would I want to share that with? And you picked me. And it's like you said, you're my girlfriend. Oh, Sheldon. She hugs him. He's like, okay, stop ruining Valentine's Day and order my pizza. Because it was baby steps with Sheldon, him getting more comfortable with intimacy, let alone physical intimacy. There was at one point, too, when Penny asked Sheldon, are you and Amy ever going to get physical? And he says, it's a possibility. And then she's just freaking out, slapping Leonard, like, oh my God. But a really touching scene that I absolutely love from season 6, from the episode The Closet Reconfiguration. And in that episode, it's when Sheldon reorganizes Howard's closet, and then he finds a letter from Howard's father. And Howard purposely doesn't want to read it because he still holds resentment that his father had walked out on him and his mother. I didn't mention his mother, of course, played by the late Carol Ann Susie. And she was never on screen, except for one time in season 6, she walked across the screen, but she was always just the voice you would hear screaming at Howard. And when she passed, the writers said they had considered possibly hiring a new actress, possibly saying that she had moved away, but eventually settling on having her pass in the show as well, because no one else could have done the role the way she did. She had the great comedic timing. So they had honored her in the show too, when they had Howard's mom pass in the show too. And that was very touching. But in this episode, it's when Howard doesn't want to read the letter from his father. And then Sheldon comes up with the idea that they each present a possibility for him. And Sheldon says, I realize if we each present you with an account of what your father wrote to you, only one of which is true, and then we don't tell you which one it is, you will forever be in a state of epistemic ambivalence. And then Penny says, yeah, and I said if it wasn't epistemic, we might as well not do it. There were always jokes like that, Penny kind of poking fun at how she isn't scientific the way these guys are, obviously. And then in a later season where she says, hey, don't dumb this down for me, just that kind of stuff. But so this scene was really a clever idea, that it's clever for the audience too, that we never find out the actual one that it is, but these are all of them. So Raj says, it's a card for your 18th birthday. Inside it said, happy birthday, Howard, I love you, Dad. Oh, and it was a Far Side card, the one where the frog has its tongue stuck to the underside of an airplane. And then Sheldon says it was a map leading to the lost treasure of famous One-Eyed Willie. And then Howard says, nice try, that's from the Goonies. And then Amy says, you didn't know it, but your father was in the auditorium at your high school graduation, and he cried because he was so proud of you. And Penny says, it was a letter explaining that your dad wasn't who he said he was. Eventually his other life caught up to him, and the only way to keep you and your mom safe was to leave. And Leonard says, your dad wrote about how family is the most important thing, and that you should never throw it away like he did. And Bernadette says, inside the envelope was a picture of your dad holding you the day you were born. On the back he wrote, Howard, my son, my greatest gift. Oh, it's so touching, so sweet, so well done. That's a great scene, one of my favorite scenes of the entire show. And I'm sure there are theories about what the actual one it is. In my mind, I always thought it was either Amy's or Penny's. That's just me personally. That's what I always thought it was, because assuming it's a letter and ruling out the other ones. So that's just me. But we'll never know, and it doesn't matter, because we never actually meet Howard's dad. That's a loose end that was never tied up. But then again, that's, I guess, how he wanted it. There was the episode where we meet Howard's half-brother, played by Matt Bennett, but then he just never shows up ever again. So it's like, what was the point of that? But I digress. But another season 6 episode I love is Love Spell Potential, where they're playing Dungeons and Dragons, and then Raj goes off to go on a date with Lucy, and that's when they finally have their first kiss. And then the whole main story where the girls were going to go to Vegas, but then they end up staying with the guys playing Dungeons and Dragons. And then at one point, a love spell is cast on Sheldon and Amy, and they're saying, oh, you guys could do it in the game. And Howard is doing all the celebrity impressions. Simon's just so talented doing all those impressions. Does Christopher Walken, Al Pacino, Jack Nicholson. It's just really great. But then when that episode takes a turn, just gets really serious, and then Amy gets uncomfortable and she leaves, and then she finally asks Sheldon if they'll ever have an intimate relationship. And Sheldon says, I know it doesn't seem like it to you, but for me, what we have is extremely intimate. I guess I know that. It's just part of me wants more. More? I mean, look at us. It's only been 3 years. Here we are in bed together. And then she's saying, oh, come on, let's go back out there. And then Sheldon says, now hold on, our characters did have a love spell cast on them. We wouldn't be playing the game right if we didn't see that through. So that was a form of intimacy and a step forward in their emotional growth in their relationship. And that's just I love that scene. That whole episode is great, but I especially love that whole scene. It's just really well done and really clever for Sheldon and Amy, and just seeing the growth in their relationship, because it's not always all about sex, even though they do eventually sleep together, but the fact that they can have intimacy without being physically intimate. So it's just very sweet. Speaking of sweet, I love the season 7 episode, The Romance Residence, with that whole fun song that Howard sings for Bernadette, If I Didn't Have You. And the lyrics are written by Kate Micucci, who plays Lucy, as I mentioned, and Ricky Lindhorn, who plays Ramona in the show. And they're the singing duo Garfunkel and Oates, as in Simon Garfunkel and Hall and Oates. But they wrote the lyrics to the song. And it's just a sweet little song for Bernadette. If I didn't have you, life would be blue. I'd be Doctor Who without the TARDIS. It's such a cute song. Oh, we couldn't have imagined how good our lives would get from the moment that we met you, Bernadette. Very sweet. I like that whole scene. I also really like the Thanksgiving decoupling from season 7. That's when Penny reveals that she and Zach got married in Vegas, and then Leonard's saying, that's a real marriage, not a fake. Like, you two are actually married. And she's saying, oh no, it was just one of those Elvis impersonators, but then so she has to get the marriage annulled. And then when Zach comes over, and then he's talking to Leonard, and he says, not cool, bro. I'm starting to think you're not the kind of guy I want dating my wife. And then, of course, with Sheldon drinking with Howard's father-in-law, and the two of them are bonding, and Howard's kind of feeling pushed out because Sheldon's just easily bonding with him, and the two are watching football together. And Sheldon's saying, well, my father used to make me watch. And he's saying, oh, well, what's your dad up to now? And he's saying, well, he passed away when I was only 14. And he's saying, well, cheers to your dad. So that's sweet, too. And then it's just funny, too, when he's talking about Amy, Sheldon. He's saying, ain't she great? And she's like, Sheldon, getting all bashful. And he says, now how about you get us a couple beers? And he slaps her on the butt. And she just walks away, like, grinning, like, oh, like she enjoyed that. And she, like, turns around, looks at him. But anyway, of course, a huge milestone for Sheldon and Amy in that season is the locomotive manipulation, the Valentine's episode that season, when the two of them finally share their first real kiss, when Sheldon kisses her, and when they're on the train together and he's feeling pressured, saying like, oh, well, if you want romance, let's have romance. At first he's doing it ironically. It's, oh, well, kissing's romantic. And then he kisses her, and then it melts into a real kiss. That was just such a big deal at the time watching it. It was so exciting. Even though I was spoiled, I already knew it was going to happen, but it was still watching it when he just moves closer to her. It was just so well acted. It was just so great. Between Jim and Mayim, they did it so well. So that was a huge milestone waiting for that to happen. And apparently, though, originally they were first going to kiss in the previous year's Valentine's episode, the Tangible Affection Proof. He was going to kiss her as his gift, but then they had taken that out. Like, after the table read, it was already gone from the script. They hadn't even rehearsed it. So then it worked out that they waited the whole other year to finally write it in, and it was executed well, because apparently earlier versions of this script too was Sheldon kissing Amy in a place of gratitude, like kissing her because he was so happy being on the train. But then instead it came from this place of not frustration necessarily, but just kind of him feeling pressured. And then he first meant it not as a joke, but he's like, oh, well, kissing's romantic, like just to do it, but then he actually ended up really enjoying it. And I remember when that scene was posted on YouTube, and then someone had said, only Sheldon Cooper could trick himself into kissing his own girlfriend. Like, yep, that sums it up. But it's just so sweet, and it was just executed perfectly. And another sweet scene I like, not romantic, finally, for once. What can I say? I'm a sucker for romance. But in the proton transmogrification, when Professor Proton aka Arthur Jeffries, but he's Professor Proton, their childhood hero, as if kind of like a Bill Nye type. But when he passes away in the show, and he's played by Bob Newhart, and he first shows up in season 6, and he's great. He just has that dry wit. He's great. But when he passes away in the show, and then Leonard and Penny go to the funeral, and then Sheldon's trying to cope with the fact that he's gone because he looked up to him, he was a childhood hero to him, and then they still have him return every now and then because he kind of becomes a figure for him to speak to in his subconscious, just for Sheldon, like when he needs him. And so then, though, when Professor Proton, Arthur, when he's telling Sheldon to appreciate his friends, and then Sheldon just gives Leonard a hug, and it's very sweet. And I really like their friendship, Sheldon and Leonard, because even in an earlier episode when Professor Proton had asked Leonard, why are you friends with Sheldon? He's saying, well, he's kind of broken and he needs me. I guess I need him too. And then another great couple moment in the Gorilla Disillusion in season 7 when Leonard proposes to Penny. And first she's saying how, because she proposes to him again, saying, all I need you is, he's saying, oh, you just want to marry me because I'm the only thing good in your life. Because she had just gotten kicked off of the movie she was doing, that dumb serial apist movie. It's like with her and Will Wheaton. She was like a gorilla. It's just so stupid. But then she gets kicked off the movie and she's saying, I don't need all that to make me happy. And saying, then, well, what do you need? She's saying, you stupid Pop-Tart. Because he's saying, before he was comparing himself to, oh, I'm just like a bran muffin. Go for your colon, but I want to be like a strawberry Pop-Tart. And then he just pulls out a ring. And it's cute. And then when he proposes to her, Penny, will you marry me? And she says, oh my God, yes. And it's touching. It's very sweet. I really like that scene too. And then another great, nice relationship episode with season 8, the prom equivalency, when they decide to have a prom. And then another great relationship milestone between Amy and Sheldon, where Amy says, Sheldon, there's something else I've been wanting to say, but before I do, I want you to know that you don't have to say it back. I know you're not ready, and I don't want you to say it just because society dictates you. I love you too. And the fact that he just says, I love you too, that he knew she was going to say that, and he acknowledges his feelings for her openly, and she's saying, you said it. And he says, there's no denying I have feelings for you that can't be explained in any other way. I briefly considered I had a brain parasite, but that seems even more far-fetched. The only conclusion was love. Oh, speaking of I love yous, when Penny says I love you to Leonard for the first time, that's great too. That's from season 6, the 43 peculiarity, where she just says it in the moment. Like, Leonard, you know I love you, so can we just let this go? And he's saying, it's the first time you ever said that to me. And she says, well, we're going to let this go because you're going to make me cry. And we both know if I start crying, you're going to start crying. And she's actually getting emotional. It's just very sweet. And apparently they just got that in one take, and that was it. They just hit the emotions perfectly. So that was a sweet scene, too. And then, of course, moving on ahead to the season 9 episode, the opening night excitation, when Sheldon and Amy finally sleep together for the first time. And Sheldon, it coincides with the opening night for the 7th Star Wars movie, which was a huge deal at the time. What was it? The Force Awakens. I'm not into Star Wars. Yeah, so I'll be honest, I'm not into Star Wars or Star Trek or any of these big science fiction things. So in this show, I have appreciation for it because they are huge things in pop culture, obviously, and all this stuff that's talked about in this show. But for me personally, I'm just not into that stuff. That's just me. But that obviously doesn't take away from my enjoyment of this show by any means. But because I appreciate how they are fans of it. So anyway, in this episode, when they sleep together for the first time, and then Sheldon gives that's going to be his gift to Amy. And he's saying, I should probably tell you something about this gift. And she says, you mean before you give it to me? Yes. May I ask you a question before I give it to you? Of course. Why are we saying give it to you like that? Sheldon, I know your present is for us to be intimate tonight. I see, and is that all right? And then she kisses him, and he says, I'm sorry, but this is a litigious society. I'm going to need verbal consent. Yes. And then they're going to kiss again. She says, let me pull up a quick contract on the internet, and they just kiss again. So they pull off that kind of nervous energy that this is something that Amy's been wanting for a really long time with Sheldon, and that's something that he hasn't been ready to explore, but then he finally is ready for it. And that's in episode 2 where Bob Newhart returns because he needs advice from Professor Proton. So it was handled very well, very respectfully and tastefully. And then of course there's a touch of humor where he's saying, I enjoyed that more than I thought I would, and you just see Amy's post-coital hair. She's saying, me too. And they're holding hands, which is sweet. He's saying, I look forward to next year, your birthday next year when we could do that again. She's saying, that works for me. So it's sweet. So that becomes a yearly thing for them. Once a year, sleeping together. And then fast forwarding on ahead to the season 11 finale when they get married, the bow tie asymmetry. I found their vows so touching. But also what I found really touching was this moment between Mary and Sheldon when she's saying, Shelley, I wish your dad could see you now. Me too. I miss him. He would be so proud of you. I know that I am. Thank you. I mean, for everything, my whole life. That's so touching and so sweet. And that's, of course, when we're reintroduced to Amy's mom, because she was first played by someone else in season 4, but then when they bring her back, she's played now by Kathy Bates, and then her father is played by Teller, as in Teller of Penn and Teller. And of course Teller never speaks in his act with Penn and Teller, but he speaks in this episode because he's silent throughout the whole time. Then when Amy's mom's just like, say something, Larry, and he just says, thank you. But I just love their vows. I found them very touching when Amy says, Sheldon, when I was a little girl, I used to dream about my wedding, but eventually I stopped because I thought that day would never come. And then I met you. From the first moment in that coffee shop, I knew that there was something special between us, even though I did work on a study that disproved love at first sight. I loved that study the moment I read it. Ironic, huh? Clearly it was wrong, because I felt something that day, and those feelings have only gotten stronger with time. I can't imagine loving you more than I do right now, but I felt that way yesterday, and the day before yesterday, and the day before that. Is that growth linear or accelerating? Accelerating. Oh, maybe we can graph it out. And then Leonard says, save something for the honeymoon. And Sheldon says, smart. And then Amy says, Sheldon, I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I've never been happier than I am in this moment marrying you. And then for Sheldon's vows, he says, Amy, I usually know exactly what to say, but in this moment I have no words. I guess I'm overwhelmed by you. In a good way, not in the elevator and the haunted mansion way. Even if I can't tell you how I feel, I will spend my life showing you how much I love you. And then, of course, Mark Hamill marries them, and it was supposed to be Will Wheaton. So that's just a great episode. I really like that episode. And at this point, so season 11 and 12, that was when Steve Holland became the showrunner. From seasons 1 to 5, it was Bill Prady. Then seasons 6 to 10, it was Stephen Millaro. And then Stephen Millaro, he's now the showrunner for Young Sheldon. And that, of course, is the prequel series with Sheldon as a child growing up in East Texas with his mom, his dad, and, of course, his twin sister, Missy, and his older brother, George Jr. And I've seen a couple episodes of that show, and I frankly don't care for it. That's just me. I'm just, not that it's a bad show, it's just the whole thing about it, the only reason it's so successful is for the name recognition. If it was about a different family with, say, a really intelligent boy and his siblings, it would not be as popular, I guarantee you that. Just for the sake that it is about Sheldon, that it has that brand recognition with synonymous with the Big Bang Theory, that's why it's so popular. And they also have, I know, Mima is in it. I'm just not, I know that they've compared it to the Wonder Years. It's fine. I'm just not really into the show. That's just me. But another great episode, though, from this show that I also want to mention really quick from season 7, the Scavenger Vortex. That's a great ensemble episode as well. And also when they have the different pairings, they had all of them doing a scavenger hunt. And then it was Penny and Sheldon and Leonard and Bernadette being super competitive. And then Amy and Howard. And Amy and Howard were just bonding, that they both like Neil Diamond. And they're just singing together and everything. So that's a fun one. And then at the end, when they're trying to find the coin, and then Raj is saying, oh, look in your pockets. I slipped those in there. So then you're all winners. And then they're just angry at him, like, are you kidding me? And then Bernadette says, you suck so hard. It's great, too. And they're just running, like, chasing him out. And he's like, I just want to do something beautiful. But before I talk about now the finale and my feelings on the series finale, I actually had the pleasure of attending a taping earlier this year. It was back in April. And it was my first and only taping. And I had actually first gotten a ticket for a taping back in 2013. And that would have been for the season 7 episode, the second episode of that season, actually, the deception verification, when Leonard had come home from being overseas. And then he had lied to Sheldon because he just wanted to spend some time with Penny. So that's the episode I would have seen taped. But then I sadly wasn't able to go. So then I was so determined. I was like, I need to at least see one taping of this show. I wanted to all these years. And I figured, well, this is the last season. It's now or never. And so I was so determined. And I had tried the week prior. And the tickets were sold out. And I was like, no, I need to get these tickets. So then again, I tried the following week. And what I had done the second time was I had the computer going and then a laptop going back and forth. And then I just kept refreshing. And then I finally was able to get 2 tickets. So I was so excited to finally, after all these years, get to go to a taping of this show. So the episode I saw taped was from one of the last few tapings of the show. It was actually the 4th to last taping. And it was for the episode The Plagiarism Schism. And that was another episode dealing with the ongoing plot in season 12 with Sheldon and Amy coming up with super asymmetry, which they had come up with during their wedding, and them trying to win a Nobel Prize for it. And those 2 guys get involved, Dr. Pemberton, played by Sean Astin, and Dr. Campbell, played by Kai Penn. And I was just so excited to get to finally experience going to a taping. And I was just so beyond happy that I actually got the tickets. It felt like winning the lottery. And I was just so happy that I was one of the last few tapings, and I was finally able to go after all these years. And my mom came with me. So, and I just have to say, though, my mom, she's not a fan of this show. She doesn't find it funny, but at the taping, she was laughing out loud throughout the entire thing, so she absolutely loved it. So there you go. So if you have been to a taping of this show, bear with me as I explain a few things. If you haven't, then you could live vicariously through me as I explain my experience. So if you've never been on a soundstage, it's kind of like, it reminds me of a big warehouse where they have the really high ceilings and they have all the lights hanging. And so I thankfully had gotten 2 general tickets, so they weren't standby tickets. And they were telling us that even with the general tickets, it wasn't guaranteed that we were going to get in because they had more VIP audience members since it was one of the last few tapings of the show. But thankfully, we did get in. And we were seated in front of Sheldon and Leonard's apartment. Even though in the last few seasons, it's Leonard and Penny's apartment, and Penny's apartment became Sheldon and Amy's apartment, with those 2 moving in together. But they still called those sets Penny's apartment and Leonard and Sheldon's apartment. So, 4A and 4B. So we were sitting in front of 4A. We were in the last row, but there were only 5 rows, and the first 3 rows were all for VIPs. So I don't know if even if all of the general tickets got in, but thankfully we did. And then the poor standbys, I don't think any of them got in because it just wasn't enough room. It's roughly 200 seats. But walking in, it was just so exciting. And then, so they sat us down there. So that was great seats. I was so excited about that. I was like, oh, this is perfect. And of course, I have a Sheldon shirt. Sheldon saying Bazinga. Of course, his catchphrase that evidently came from one of the writers who would just like play pranks on people. Then he would just say Bazinga, as in like gotcha. So that became a thing that they gave to Sheldon. But when you walk in, then they have the monitors set up and they have microphones and speakers. So the microphones capturing the audience's laughter, and then the speakers so then we can hear the actors, and then monitors for when you can't see whatever it is they're filming, and then you have the monitors in front of you. But on the monitors when we walked in, they just had all stills from various episodes of the show, just kind of iconic scenes and moments throughout the shows. So that made me nostalgic a little bit, reminding me of all hilarious scenes throughout the show over the years. And then before the episode, they show the audience an episode that hadn't aired yet. So the episode they showed us was actually the Laureate's accumulation, which then aired that Thursday anyway. But that one ended with Amy having her whole meltdown because those guys are basically imposters trying to pass off that they came up with super asymmetry and everything. So then in this episode, it's all about how they may have plagiarized their findings in some earlier paper that they had written. And the guy who talks to the audience and warms up the audience, his name is Mark Sweet, and he has been with the show, he said, since the beginning. He also is the warm-up guy for the show Mom. And I had been to the Warner Brothers lot before because I had gone on the tour the year prior, actually. Actually, no, 2 years ago. This was my third time visiting Los Angeles and California. But we had stayed this time in Burbank, which is where the show was filmed. So we were in walking distance to the lot. I didn't see the plaque, though, for the Big Bang Theory stage. That, I guess, was on the other side of the building. But I did see right across, stage 24, I saw the Friends stage right there. And stage 25, the show that was filmed before Big Bang from 02 to 06 was What I Like About You. And I loved that show when I was younger, starring Amanda Bynes and Jenny Garth. I'll have to discuss that show eventually, but I digress. Whatever show is going to be filmed after this has really big shoes to fill. I mean, The Big Bang Theory. I mean, will there be another show as vastly popular as this show, running 12 years and having all of this success? I don't think so. I think this was the last hit sitcom, multicam sitcoms, because those are really dying out. It's really more single camera sitcoms nowadays. Multicam isn't as popular. That was really all it was back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. But anyway, so walking in, watching the episode beforehand, it was fun watching a new episode with the whole group. When they played the theme song, everyone clapped and cheered. It was just so exciting. We were getting so pumped. And then, of course, Mark Sweet, he introduces the cast. And it was just so exciting seeing all of them. I had seen Jim Parsons in person before, and I had actually seen him in a play. It was back in 2015. My sister and I went to go see it, called An Act by God. Not An Act by God, sorry, An Act of God, my bad. And that was a great play starring Jim Parsons. It was just a 90-minute monologue, more or less. And he played God. That was a great play, but I digress again. And I don't remember all the little details, but of course I'll share what I do remember with you, because it was over a month ago, and it's just hard to remember everything. There's no phones allowed, obviously, so you can't take pictures or anything. But that's better anyway, just being in the moment, just sitting there enjoying it. And as Mark Sweet explained, it's like a play. They do the whole thing start to finish in order. they film each scene at least twice, and there's pickup shots and everything like that. So if you've never been to a taping of a show, some of them take actually much longer, but this show, they had it down to a science, pardon the pun, but they really do. And of course there are pre-taped scenes as well, so that helps move it along. But we got in, it was about 5:30 when we went into the sound stage, and by the time we got out, it was a little after 9:30, so approximately 4 hours being in there. But the actual taping started at 6:30, and then the actual filming of scenes, I would say, was definitely under an hour, because they would film each scene twice, as I mentioned. So it was maybe 45 minutes, give or take, because it was just very quick. The thing that takes long is just waiting for the next scene, the setup for each scene and all that. And there's just so many people on stage with them, and then they just all clear out. Everyone knows what they have to do. Everyone's really professional. They all clearly work well together. You see everyone just talking and chatting in between takes. So the first scene of that episode is when Amy and Sheldon are talking to Dr. Pemberton and Dr. Campbell, and Amy's saying she apologizes for her outburst. And they did the whole... And then President Seabird is there. He's so funny, too. President Seabird, played by Joshua Malina. They're just basically trying to smooth things over with them. And the first time they did it, it was flawless. So that whole set... So, I gotta explain all that. So, again, bear with me if you've already been to a taping, but if you haven't. So, the way the sets are situated, it is the standing sets that never move. It is 4B, which is Penny's, as they call it, Penny's apartment, but it's really Sheldon and Amy's apartment. Then, of course, the hallway with the infamous broken elevator. And then 4A, the main set, that is what was Leonard and Sheldon's apartment, but of course now Leonard and Penny's apartment. And then they have swing sets, which are sets that are just built for whatever episode is filming that week. So the sets they had for this episode was this restaurant that was next to 4A. So that is that set for all of those scenes. And then next to 4B was the cafeteria set. So from where we were sitting, we had decent seat to be able to see the restaurant set. It was kind of at an angle, so we couldn't see everything. But then the cafeteria set couldn't see too much. And then there were also a couple sets that we couldn't see at all as the audience because it wasn't facing us. It was like next to us, so we couldn't even see them. And that was Kripke's office, and also another set, which I will get to. It was actually a scene that was cut from the episode. So in this first scene, they did the first take absolutely flawlessly, and it was great, and it was funny, it was perfect. And then when they did it again, Mayim flubbed the line. She's like, I don't know what to say. So then they had to do that over. And they did a couple pickup shots where Sheldon says that line about how Amy she was so nervous she chewed through her knife guard like a piece of jerky. They did a pickup shot with that. Pickup is just when they just pick up one line or two of dialogue, not doing the whole scene over. So that was the cold open. And before each scene, it was like scene apple, like instead of scene A, scene B, it was like scene apple, scene baker. That's how they title the scenes. And it was just the person with the clapper. Her name is Whitney, evidently. She'd be like, cameras A, B, X, mark, and just snap the clapper. So then when they did the following scene, when Kripke shows up, I was just so excited because they give us little programs. So they give you the taping dates, and then you have the cast, and you have the who's going to be the episode, you have who wrote it, the title of the episode, obviously, and then like little brief summaries of the main cast and things that they have worked on, other things like that. And then looking at the cast list, when I saw John Ross Bowie, Kripke listed, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see Kripke again. And he never messed up at all. But then when Sean Astin's character, Dr. Pemberton, when he first was talking to, it's like, oh, this is my friend Kripina, I can do that better. Like, he messed up, so he had to do that over again. And Kripke's like, oh, you old so-and-so. And then when he walks away, it's like, oh, I hate that guy. So then after they filmed that scene the first time, then at one point, Jim and Mayim got up and they walked over to peer out at the audience. And when they aren't using the sets, they have them covered up with just these barriers, so the other sets are covered. So like they had peered through the barriers, and then they were looking for someone in the audience, I guess, and then they spotted whoever it was and they waved. But then Jim waved and Mayim waved, and when Jim waved, I was just like, oh, hi, Jim! Like, I waved at Jim, like, as if Jim Parsons is waving at me. I was like, oh, hi, Jim! But, like, then he looked up again, like, he waved again, because I guess other audience members were waving. Oh my gosh, I was like, so, I'll just go with Jim Parsons waved at me, guys. I'll just go with that story. But whoever he waved at, but it was just cute. Like, then he waved again at the audience, but it was cute. I liked that. That's just funny, too. I might as well, I'll just say this. Watching Jim Parsons, I was quickly reminded why I at one point had a huge crush on him, not gonna lie. There's just something about Jim Parsons. He's just so adorable. He's just got that charisma. He's just great. I love Jim Parsons. The whole cast too, but just something about Jim. Anyway. So then the scene when Sheldon and Amy are going to go over to have dinner with everyone in 4A, and first they're talking about how, I talked to my mom, so they first did that. And from where we were sitting, we couldn't see them walking out of their apartment, but then we saw them when they came out, walking across the hallway. And with me, like, I looked at the monitors as little as possible, because of course, when you're at home, you just watch it that way, and I was just wanting to see as much as I could, taking in as much as I could as possible, so I just didn't look at the monitors unless I absolutely had to, specifically with those scenes that we couldn't see at all. But other than that, with all the obstructions, I was just like, no, let me just watch it live like that, because it's just more exciting that way, seeing all the stuff that we don't see at home. So, with that part, that was funny to me too, how they would get it absolutely flawlessly the first take, and then on the second take, Jim flubbed lines, like, oh wait, what was that again? He had to, like, look at the script. And Jim too, he still always had his index cards just going over his lines before each scene. So he flubbed the line, had to do that over when talking about how he had called his mom or whatever. And then when they walked in to 4A, at first the other actors weren't there yet, and then Mark Sweet was saying, oh, how this is all really the same scene. They would just cut it later and add that in. So then when they walk in, then obviously in the show, you see they walk into the apartment, everyone's there getting ready to eat. And so that whole part was... I was so happy that we had at least one scene with all the main cast in 4A. And watching that scene, there was just a part where I thought to myself how, wow, there's been literally hundreds and hundreds of scenes in this one apartment. Here's just another one that I'm witnessing. It's TV history. So that was just so exciting to me, thinking of that, just seeing the main cast all together doing this one scene. So with this scene, there was a part where Mayim messed up when when Amy crosses over to sit down on the couch. So she passes by Howard. So there was one point when Mayim just kind of stepped on Simon's foot, and she was like, sorry, like she giggled and had to start over. And they're really quick when they mess up. It's like, okay, back to one, just start over again. Whenever they flub a line or anything like that. So they're just quick to just start over and complete the scene. And another thing was that they changed lines here and there. What's interesting, too, is that they don't necessarily change their delivery of the lines, I guess unless their director tells them to. Oh, and that's the thing, too. The director for this episode in particular, it was actually Lorre. And usually she's directed a couple of episodes here and there, but the main director for the show, who's directed the most episodes, is Mark Sandrowski. He was there from the very beginning. He directed the majority of the episodes of this show. But this episode was Lorre, who is Chuck Lorre's daughter. And there was at one point, after they did this scene where they all got together and just all took a picture, the main cast, and with Nikki Lorre sitting on the couch, so that was cute. And there was a part too where in between takes when they got the DJ going and they had Mark Sweet talking to members of the audience and stuff, and he's giving out candy, and also Kaylee's dad was there, and he's been to every taping apparently, so he was just hanging out in the back, and then Mark Sweet was like throwing candy at him, and then Kaylee's dad gave me a piece. I was like so excited. I was like, oh, thank you. I'm not sure what his name was, but that was sweet. I was like, oh, thank you. Because I was like, he's like, who wants candy? He gave me a piece. So I was sitting right there. The Three Musketeers. So I love how I'm just like giggling, remembering all this. So while they were filming this scene in between takes, another cute thing too was when they had the DJ going with all them, just kind of seeing how the cast interacts. I wish, like, kind of overhear what they were saying, but you can't hear them with the music playing. You can't hear anything. But Kunal was just kind of dancing. I was like, oh, and Kunal's so cute too. And then there's one point where he just kind of like had his hand on Jim's shoulder, and Jim was like patting his hands. Like, it was cute just seeing how the cast interacts with each other. And Mayim and Jim, they were like talking a lot too in the earlier scenes with just the two of them. And also, John Ross Bowie was talking with Jim and stuff too. But so then with this scene, then there was another blooper where Johnny messed up, and he's like, oh, that's not the effing line either, but he said the F word. And there were kids in the audience, but, everyone just kind of laughed, and they just moved on from that. And then in another scene in 4A, when it was just Amy and Penny drinking wine together, talking about the whole dilemma about whether they should, how Leonard got evidence from Kripke that they may have plagiarized. And then they did the scene twice. And I loved the line where Amy says, because that's what a princess would do, because it reminded me of course, her iconic tiara scene, how she loves princesses. So that was cute. And then she first did the line more, it's like, saying, you could have been, I wanted to be the princess. No, you were the gesture. I'm the princess. Like, she did it more angrily and she toned it down. It's hard. I'm trying to remember. But so with the third take with that scene, Kaylee was doing her line, then she was like messed up. And then at one point she said, I don't know. I told you twice already. You should know by now. And then that made Mayim laugh, because when she had flubbed her line the third time. And then the deleted scene now that I want to talk about, it was, so the B story with this episode is how Howard finds out from Bernadette that another waitress at the Cheesecake Factory had a crush on him, liked him or whatever. And all those scenes in the bedrooms, those were all pre-taped, by the way. So they only show those once, and then that's it. And same with the monitor. They have someone switching live back and forth between the actors, and then when an actor messes up, they just cut the monitors and they have to start over. But so the scene was actually, so in the episode, Howard says how, hey, I did something stupid today. I went to the Cheesecake Factory. So there was actually a scene that was cut from the final episode, which was so disappointing. I was looking forward to seeing it, but it was cut from the episode, and it was Howard and Kunal, Howard and Raj at the Cheesecake Factory, and Howard saying, oh, does anyone look familiar? And then trying to figure out who it is that liked him. And Raj is saying, oh no, but that chocolate cheesecake, whatever it was, is calling my name. And then the waitress came over. So this poor waitress cut from the episode, her name is, in the show, Trina, and she's played by Mimi Giannopoulos. So, sorry, Mimi, your scene was cut. That's disappointing. But she did a great job. She didn't mess up at all. And so, on the first take, she came over. So, this was another set, too, that we could not see at all. Since I was at the very last row, I was able to kind of see a sliver of the Cheesecake Factory set if I leaned back in my chair a lot. So that's all I could see, though. I couldn't see anything. So then we had to watch the monitors. But the first take, they changed the lines here and there. So she was like, oh, what can I do for you? And then Raj says, even though he's married with 2 children, he's trying to find out if who a girl was that liked him years ago, something like that. And then she says, I'll get you another waitress, and she walks off. And then Howard's saying, are you trying to sabotage me? He's saying, well, that and my diet, as in wanting a cheesecake. Then the second take, she said, I don't have time for this, and she walked away. And then the third take, she didn't leave, and she stayed there. So he said that line again, like, oh, even though he's married with 2 kids, he's trying to see if a girl years ago had a crush on him still remembers him, or something like that. So then she's just standing there, and then Howard says again, are you trying to sabotage me? And then this line that sadly was cut from the episode, that got the biggest laugh out of me for whatever reason. But he says, Raj says something to the extent of, when he asks if he sabotaged him, he says, like, did you just come here to sabotage me? And then he says, not at first, but it was just something I thought of in the moment. And for whatever reason, that got the biggest laugh out of me, because it just felt so genuine. Like, oh, no, I didn't mean to sabotage you, but it's just something I thought of right now, because it felt so genuine. Like, it must have been a line that the writers came up with on the fly. Like, oh, he just thought of this in the moment to sabotage him. So that got the biggest laugh out of me for whatever reason. I mean, I was doubled over in laughter. I found it absolutely hilarious. And the audience, too, got a kick out of it. It was so funny. I just love that. So I was disappointed that was cut from that little B story. And then, of course, the A story wraps up with Sheldon and Amy not wanting Leonard to give in that evidence that proves that they plagiarized their work, that they want to win the Nobel Prize honorably. And then the last few scenes, so that was the last scene we saw live with Sheldon and Amy confronting Leonard and Penny. And then when Sheldon's saying, really? Well, I'll go with mine. It's less complicated that way. And then at the end of that scene, when they finished it the second time, then there was just a part where after they yelled cut, and Kaylee just, like, put her hands on her hips, and then Jim just, like, burst out laughing. He, like, leaned forward laughing. He's like, like, he was just laughing at Kaylee, like, mimicking her. It was just so cute. Seeing little things like that, the way they interact, as I said, you don't see that at home, obviously. We just see the final product. So then watching at home, too, was just an interesting experience, because watching at home, too, there were things I picked up on, like little facial expressions that you don't see, because it's just your perspective wherever you're sitting in the audience. You just can't see every little thing, but that was interesting, too. And that whole tag scene was pre-taped, because they had stunt doubles for the 2 of them getting into a fight. And then with Sheldon saying at the very end, when the other guy comes in, he's saying, oh, I don't know what Linda sees in either of them. So it was just such a fun experience. I was just so happy to be there, and it was so exciting. Mark's suite was great, just keeping everyone entertained in between takes. It was just so fun to see the cast in person, just to be there witnessing TV history. And that episode we saw, it was episode 276. So then there's a part in every taping when Johnny and Kaylee come up to the audience to say their thank yous and everything, and Kaylee was getting emotional, saying it's our final 4, it's very emotional for us, and she's saying my dad's been to every taping and her in-laws were there, and she was getting choked up, her voice was wavering, and Johnny just kind of like put his hand on her back, patting her back. It was sweet. And then Johnny was saying how this was their 276th taping, officially making them the longest running sitcom in history. So that was really cool to have witnessed that. And I want to give a shout out to Sanny Spear. That's at Sanny Spear, SANNYSPEAR on Twitter. We were chatting on Twitter because she was also at the tapings. That was cool. And I know she had said this was her second taping, so that was cool too. And I also, while I'm giving shout-outs, I want to give a shout-out to Roxanne and Nicole of the Big Bang Buzzcast. I had written into that a couple times, and because I had actually asked, Roxanne has been to a lot of tapings, and I had asked her a question because I wasn't sure if I had a standby or a general ticket, and she was really nice in answering my questions. So that was sweet. Thank you, Roxanne. And if you're a big fan of this show, you may have already heard of the Big Bang Buzzcast, but they recap each episode, and Roxanne's been to a lot of tapings. Nicole's been to a few tapings as well. They're big fans of the show. Roxanne has also interviewed the cast, and that's really cool. So definitely check out that podcast if you're a big fan of this show. Also, I want to give a shout out to Regina. That's at RGBCN. She's on Instagram, Twitter. You could support her on Patreon. Regina is a super talented artist. She's made some absolutely amazing artwork. Specifically Sheldon and Amy. Yay, Amy fans. And she went to a taping earlier this year too. And I'd actually, as I told you, Regina, that I watched her taping on... listen to me. She did an Instagram live talking about her taping, and she had went to the episode 274 when Amy's freaking out about if she doesn't win the Nobel Prize. And then that one features Soft Kitty again with Sheldon singing to Amy, so that's really cool. But Regina's a super talented artist. You could definitely check out her artwork if you haven't. A lot of Shamey sketches in particular, which I love. Really great stuff. So, muchas gracias para escuchando, Regina. Thank you so much. And so, watching the show in person, I just had a newfound respect about all the work that goes into it. And it was just, everyone clearly gets along, and it really is a family. It was just really cool to see all of that in person. Definitely an unforgettable, once-in-a-lifetime experience. And then the last thing, when we were leaving, I was like, oh, let me get my last look. So the last thing I saw was just, when the cast all came out, that's too, so they do the curtain call, and then he rattles off all the names again. Mark Sweet saying, thank you for watching The Big Bang Theory, and he just says all the actors' names. And then Mayim came out, and then the rest of them came out with their arms on each other's backs, like a little conga line. So I don't know why Mayim wasn't included in that. And apparently, though, in the final taping, they all came out holding hands, so that's sweet too. But so the last thing I saw, though, just getting my last looks before leaving, because sadly they've already taken down all the sets. It's all long gone. Oh my gosh. But I just saw Jim running across the stage, like heading back to his dressing room, I guess, or whatever. And he was already changed, wearing his glasses, wearing his regular clothes. And I was like, bye, Jim. Like, I love you, Jim. Oh my gosh. But, so that was just so much fun. And my mom loved it. And then watching the episode too, she loved it too. She was laughing again. So it was great. Such a fun, unforgettable experience. And then, this episode's really long. But before I wrap up, of course, I have to talk about the final 2 episodes of the show, The Change Constant and The Stockholm Syndrome. And there were a lot of loose ends that were tied up, and it was a satisfying conclusion, but there were a couple of things that I would have liked to have seen, but there's only so much time that they couldn't get to everything. But I was so excited when they were waiting to hear if they got the Nobel, if they were going to win the Nobel Prize. And just that whole cold open with Leonard saying, oh, no one's earned it more than me, to finally slap Sheldon because he falls asleep. And then when Amy gets the call, and then she just says, we won. And her delivery of that is perfect. And I just got tears in my eyes watching that the first time. Oh my gosh, because I watched the final 2 episodes twice now. And it just made me emotional, and it just felt so great. Like, yes, they did it. They won. I loved it so much. And then when Sheldon's like, oh, what if I'm dreaming? And then Leonard slaps him. That's so funny. Oh my gosh. And big loose ends that they did tie up. And one of the big things was finally that darn elevator getting fixed. And the reveal was absolutely perfect. When Sheldon's freaking out about how everything's changing, and then he's freaking out that Amy got a new makeover and she looks different. He's saying, well, she's the one constant in my life, and that's changing too. There's too many changes. And then, of course, Penny's, you hear the ding, and then the elevator opens. She's like, can you believe it? They finally fixed the elevator. And that was just such a great reveal. The audience going crazy. That must have been so exciting, seeing that in person. I also love that meta joke when Leonard's saying how, oh, I'm always chilly. because how he's not allowed to touch the thermostat. And then when Raj says, "Is that why you wear a hoodie all the time?" He's like, "Yes." The only thing with this is that they already did that with Sheldon being freaked out by change. That was not anything new. So that was something I was like, all right, that's makes sense. It's just that wasn't anything. We've seen this plot before, but that's all right. And then the final episode of the show, the Stockholm Syndrome. I know Roxanne was at this tape. I'm looking forward to hearing stuff about that. But when that meta line too, when Leonard's saying that was a pleasurable 139 and a half hours, and that's how long it takes to watch the show, 139 and a half hours. That's 279 episodes of this show when they're rebuilding the DNA model. And then we finally see for the first and only time on screen the Wolowitz kids, because they were never shown on screen, which was clever, and because that's hard to work with child actors, so that was good. But then that was a nice little nod just to see them for that one time on screen. And then this too, with Sheldon being selfish, and then because then we find out, which was exciting too, that Penny is pregnant. Even though, the only thing though is that earlier this season, that Penny was adamant about not wanting kids. So that's fine, her not wanting kids, but then the fact that she's pregnant now and that it was an accident, I mean, I kind of wish they hadn't made her, it's fine if she didn't want kids, they could have just went that route, but the fact that they made her that not want kids and then she gets pregnant anyway, I mean, that kind of like diminishes in both regards. Like, I wish then they didn't do all that with her not wanting children, because not everyone wants children, and that's absolutely fine. But in this case, it's just now her having to come on board because now they're pregnant, they're going to have a baby. But the reason I like it, though, is something that I was hoping for that, though, because it's, of course, a lovely callback to that very first episode, Our Babies Will Be Smart and Beautiful. And that's what Sheldon himself alludes to in his acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize. But then what I like too is that when Amy's the one that tells them, well, you broke their hearts, and he's saying, well, I didn't mean to. She says, I know you didn't mean to. And she's like really upset in that scene. It's really well acted too. And she's saying, you never mean to. That's why anyone ever tolerates you. And he asks, is that why you? And she says, sometimes yes. And then in his speech, instead of being self-centered and only focusing on himself the way he's always been, he instead is humbling and he thanks his friends. And I love Amy's speech too, where she says, I would just like to take this moment to say to all the young girls out there who dream about science as a profession, go for it. It is the greatest job in the world. And if anybody tells you can't, don't listen. And now, speaking of not listening, my husband, Dr. Sheldon Cooper. He's like, oh, did you finish? Great job. And then when he's talking about his friends, and then he asks them all to stand. And it's touching, too, when he says each of their names. And he says astronaut Howard Wolowitz, finally showing him respect towards that huge accomplishment. Dr. Rajesh Kutapalli, all of them, etc. And then when he's talking about Leonard and Penny, and he says, I was there the moment Leonard and Penny met. He said to me that their babies would be smart and beautiful. And now that they're expecting, I have no doubt that that will be the case. Howard, Bernadette, Raj, Penny, Leonard, I apologize if I haven't been the friend you deserve. But I want you to know, in my way, I love you all. And I love you. Thank you. So that was touching, and that was a nice note to end the show on, him thanking his friends, his true support system, because they've been on this journey together throughout the whole show. And then just the final scene of all of them sitting together, eating dinner the way they always do, around the apartment, very sweet. And then another callback with Penny once again wearing the shirt she wore in that first episode. That was a nice little touch too. And we hear an acoustic version of the theme song. I really liked that too. So it was really nice. I liked too also that how with other sitcoms, sometimes more often than not, it's the main characters kind of going their separate ways, moving on to other chapters in their lives. I like how here it's just all of them still together, that life goes on, that they are a family in their own way. They're still friends, they're still going to go to work, and life goes on. No major changes other than the Nobel, which is a huge accomplishment, which I kind of wish Leonard had been included too, because Leonard and Sheldon just, I feel like acknowledging that would have been nice. And also, so what I would have liked to have seen, one was that the part where Amy was crying in the bathroom, and then it turns out she's just upset because she doesn't like how frumpy she looks, and then she decides to get a makeover, do something for herself, which that's nice too, to do something for herself, to celebrate because she's deserving of it, and that's something she wants to do. But I like that too also, just on another note. The fact that she's wearing her tiara, because this is a huge day for her, a huge accomplishment, so she's wearing her tiara, just like when she wore her tiara at their wedding as well. That was really sweet on her wedding day. The tiara from Sheldon, that's really cute. But, so when she's crying and then she's upset about that, I first thought, because she was crying, I thought, oh my god, she's hormonal, I think she's going to be pregnant. So I was disappointed that that wasn't the case, because I just would have liked to have seen just Sheldon's reaction to that. I'm sure maybe he would have been stunned at first, but then he would have kissed her and just would have been so excited, and to bring his child prodigy into the world with Amy, that would have been adorable. And also we know from young Sheldon, spoiler alert, because this was revealed in the season 1 finale, which I found this out after the fact, but that Sheldon, in a voiceover, he says how he has children eventually. So we know Sheldon and Amy have children eventually. But, so I would have liked to have seen that. That's just something I would have wanted to have seen. And also, I would have liked to have seen Leonard and Penny with their child. Like, maybe a flash forward, just them raising their child. I always assumed for some reason that they would have a girl first. That just is my headcanon. They have a little girl first, and maybe Sheldon and Amy have a boy first. That's just what I always think. So that's just some things I would have liked to have seen. But it was a satisfying finale. A great send-off to all these characters. Raj didn't really, because he ended things with Anu, so he didn't really have... That's still open-ended for him, whether he'll find love. I'm sure he will eventually. I'm gonna miss watching these characters every week. But with all that being said, I do have a short story to share now. It is, of course, a Sheldon and Amy story. I love the Shamey. And to give some context, because you'll see as I read it, but I wrote this back in 2014, so it was before season 8 had aired. So just to put that frame of reference there. So it's called The Left and Right Brain Dichotomy, and this isn't the full story. It is the majority of it, though. If you're interested in reading the full story, I'll be glad to direct you where to find it. But here we go. Without further ado, it's story time. The room was impeccably tidy. It was sparsely filled with any furniture. The walls were bare, not a single unnecessary poster or picture frame hanging off of them. Metal filing cabinets containing confidential documents lined one of the walls. Against another wall, perpendicular to the cabinets, was a large bookcase stacked with hundreds upon hundreds of books. Primarily about science, and categorized alphabetically, of course, by author's last name. The wooden floor shined, glossy and spotless. The whole room was quiet and practical, serving as an ideal setting for anyone who wanted to conduct research without any interruptions. A door opened and in walked Sheldon, donning his blue t-shirt with the image of a DNA double helix model on his chest. A dark blue long-sleeved shirt beneath it. His slow, confident footsteps echoed throughout the spacious room as he strode over to the desk set up in the center. A sleek black desk lamp sat beside his laptop, which was open, waiting to be used. He pulled out the black swivel chair and sat down in front of his laptop, where a blank Word document lay before him on the screen. He cleared his throat and brought his hands to the keyboard. Soon the sound of his fingertips striking the keys broke the silence as he worked diligently, writing away, his brow tightening with a look of serious concentration. Sheldon's log, he wrote at the top, centering the text before he began a new paragraph, and unleashed his thoughts onto the page. I seem to be experiencing a strange bout of acute indigestion. I use the term acute for the simple fact that the symptoms are seemingly benign thus far. Thankfully, I have no signs of any severe gastric pain or heartburn. However, the unsettling feeling in my stomach and dull pulsing vein in my neck are persistent signs that whatever ailment I'm beginning to contract must not be taken lightly. Hence, I'll use this space to describe all factors surrounding and leading up to my recent physical distress. The first sign of distress occurred this evening at about Lefty, Lefty, Lefty. Sheldon's jaw tensed. He immediately stopped typing and drew her hands to his forehead, letting out an exasperated sigh. He didn't bother to get up right away, or even turn to face the door, even as the person behind it continued bellowing at an unnecessarily loud decibel, just as he always did. "I know you're in there, Lefty. You need to let me in right now. We've got a huge emergency on our hands." Knowing he wasn't going to be left alone, Sheldon begrudgingly got up from his seat, leaving his laptop open, and strolled across the room, hands behind his back. The voice from behind the door grew even louder, more erratic, as Sheldon approached it with an impressive air of calmness. "Oh, please, Lefty, let me in. Please, 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 please." Sheldon opens the door, coming face to face with a second, much more lively and energetic Sheldon Cooper. This Sheldon wore his red flash t-shirt over a maroon long-sleeved shirt. He was Sheldon's right brain. "Must you always shout?" asked left-brain Sheldon, turning his back to him to allow right-brain Sheldon to enter. "Why are you always so cold to me, Lefty?" asked right Sheldon, a pout on his lips, as he walked in and closed the door behind him. His ravenous bright blue eyes took in his surroundings. "Gee whiz, it sure has been a heck of a long time since I've been in here. I've almost forgotten how large your room is. Oh, but look, you still have these gray walls. How terribly dull and depressing. You should see my room." "I have," said left Sheldon, returning to his desk chair. "So much color, and everything in a total disarray. It looks like a hippie's den in there. You ought to get rid of some of that clutter. Or better yet, all of it." "I don't have time for that right now, Lefty," said right Sheldon. He moved about the room, unable to stand still. "We've got much more important matters to discuss." "Yes, I assumed as much," said left Sheldon, whose eyes were back on the screen, reading over what he'd just written. "By the way, forgive me for veering off topic, but how many times have I told you not to call me Lefty? My name is Dr. Sheldon Lee Cooper, as is yours. We are two halves of one exceptionally brilliant mind. The fact that you insist on addressing me as Lefty as though it's some sort of affectionate nickname is beyond irritating, not to mention degrading. Lefty, please, would it kill you to give me a break for once? I didn't come here to argue with you," said right Sheldon. "It seems as though you're always ready to start a fight with me. It really hurts my feelings." "Of course it does," said left Sheldon, devoid of any emotion. "You are, after all, the metaphysical representation of Sheldon's right brain hemisphere, which predominantly focuses on expressing and reading emotions, as well as showcasing intuition and creativity, whereas my much more practical duties as Sheldon's left brain hemisphere involve reasoning, critical thinking, and understanding logic. Now, I'm not insinuating that one half is better than the other, as both are necessary for a healthy and well-adjusted mind. That being said, let's not forget the theory that one side of the brain tends to dominate the other, and of course, in Sheldon's case, he has much more of an analytical mind, hence making me the dominant being between the two of us." Right Sheldon silently stared at left Sheldon with the distant, glazed-over countenance, only to shake his head. "Listen, Lefty, the reason I'm here is because I need to talk to you about Sheldon's feelings for Amy." "Ah, yes, Amy Farrah Fowler," said left Sheldon, at last picking up where he left off with his writing. As he typed, he continued to speak, boasting with all importance. "As another left-brain dominant human being, and a woman who continues to show success in her respected field of neurobiology, Amy has proven herself to be quite the worthy companion to one Sheldon Cooper. Aside from the grueling fact that she's gradually transforming him into a testosterone-infused male driven by lust and desire." overall, I should say that she's definitely been a noteworthy addition to his life. Well, that's good to hear because I'm 99.9% sure that Sheldon is in love with Amy, said Right Sheldon. Left Sheldon stopped, trying to make sense of that statement in a matter of just a few seconds. With logic and reason failing to cooperate with him in that moment, however, he simply leaned back in his chair and asked, "Come again?" Right Sheldon stared back at him with another dazed look on his face. "All right," he said with a nod, only to turn around and start heading straight for the door. "Where are you going?" asked Left Sheldon, lowering his eyebrows in annoyance. "You told me to come again, so exit and come in again I shall," said Right Sheldon. Left Sheldon let out an impatient sigh, muttering to himself, "Dear Lord, just when I think you can no longer surprise me with how dense you can be. Get back here, would you? I didn't mean literally." Right Sheldon stopped just as he was reaching for the doorknob and turned to face him. "You didn't?" "Of course not," said Left Sheldon. "Allow me to be unambiguous for you. What I'd like to know is, do you have any concrete evidence whatsoever to back up your rather bold assessment that Sheldon is, allegedly, to use your words, in love with Amy?" "Oh," said Right Sheldon, and his face suddenly brightened with a smile as he clapped his hands together. "I'm so glad you asked, Lefty. I've brought a visual aid." He pulled something out of his back pocket, a long folded-up piece of paper, and unraveled it in a whip-like motion, the snapping sounds causing Left Sheldon to jump in his seat. He smoothed it out. "I drew this myself." "You certainly are the artist," said Left Sheldon in a condescending tone, thus far unimpressed. That is, until he got the first full sight of Right Sheldon's elaborate drawing of none other than Amy. Left Sheldon grew quiet with concealed intrigue as he studied the picture, which Right Sheldon was now sticking to the wall with some adhesive tape. The drawing was remarkably detailed, to the point where it could have passed as a photograph rather than a mere pencil sketch. Amy was smiling, close-lipped, wearing one of her signature cardigans, looking as appealing as she always did. Right Sheldon looked over his shoulder to catch Left Sheldon gawking at his drawing, prompting him to crack an impish grin. "I can see you're impressed, Lefty." Left Sheldon snapped out of it immediately, a scowl crossing his face as he slapped his palm against the armrest of his chair. "Curse you and your ability to read facial expressions." "Oh my, do I detect a hint of jealousy in your tone?" teased Right Sheldon. "I'm absolutely not jealous," said Left Sheldon, just a bit too rashly. He was quick to change the subject. "Will you kindly get back to the topic you've proposed and make your case so that you can get out of here and I can finally return to my work in peaceful solitude?" "Well, someone's touchy," said Right Sheldon with a haughty chuckle as he strode over to the clean whiteboard that Left Sheldon kept set up in the corner of the room. "May I?" "If you must," said Left Sheldon. As Right Sheldon wheeled the whiteboard forward, he started humming the opening bar of the Star Wars theme song. "Stop that," snapped Left Sheldon, and Right Sheldon did, though not without giving him a dejected look. "You certainly know how to spoil a guy's fun," said Right Sheldon, straightening the whiteboard. He picked up a red marker and uncapped it, sketching out a picture of her brain as he spoke. "Anyway, on to the topic at hand. It's clear that Sheldon is incredibly fond of Amy, and that he has been for some time now. However, you may have noticed that ever since Sheldon kissed Amy during their Valentine's Day trip, his feelings for her have started to change. They're growing stronger, though he's struggling to come to terms with them because he's afraid. As a result, instead of embracing his feelings, he's made several attempts to put an end to them, such as by trying to break up with Amy or rejecting the idea of moving in with her." Right Sheldon finished up his intricate drawing with a flourishing flick of the wrist, while Left Sheldon had his index finger to his cheek and his thumb beneath his chin, observing Right Sheldon as he recapped the red marker with a click, then picked up a green one. "I trust you're still paying attention, Lefty, right? Ha, get it?" asked Right Sheldon as he uncapped the new marker. "I'm so witty." Left Sheldon let out a soft sigh, wanting to do much more to express his escalating frustration. "Yes, although if I may propose a suggestion, I'd put an end to the amateurish attempt at psychoanalysis if I were you, as you're only embarrassing yourself. If you'd truly like to raise a compelling argument, you should use language that pertains to our existence by focusing on the brain." "Ah, now you're getting ahead of me. I was just about to do that, said Wright Sheldon, turning back to the board. He started filling in some of the lines that he'd drawn inside the brain, following the pattern with the vivid green marker. As you know, some of the hormones affected when falling in love include dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and vasopressin. You'll note the changes in these hormones by the areas of the brain I'm currently highlighting. I see where you're going with all of this, said Left Sheldon. You're going to point out that, as of recently, whenever Sheldon is in Amy's presence, his brain experiences an influx of these hormones, thus serving as scientific, tangible proof that Sheldon is in fact in love with her. Yes, that's exactly where I was going, said Wright Sheldon, excited as always. Suddenly he froze, a realization dawning on him. Does that mean you're actually agreeing with me? You realized it too? As Left Sheldon sat there, taking in the eager grin upon Wright Sheldon's face, his quick mind led him to strike a realization of his own. He removed the hand from his face and held it up. Now, hold on. I'm beginning to get the impression that the 0.1% of doubt you alluded to earlier is stemming from the fact that you need my approval in order to be 100% sure. Is that correct? Wright Sheldon's smile faded. He glanced away, down at the marker in his hand, and gave it a squeeze. Well, yes, he said sheepishly, practically mumbling it. But it was all Left Sheldon needed to hear to inflate his ego all over again. I knew it. I am the superior being between the two of us, said Left Sheldon. He stood up at last and walked around his desk to approach Wright Sheldon, who peeked up at him. In that case, allow me to put an end to this supposed mind-boggling revelation once and for all. Sheldon is not in love with Amy, nor will he ever be. He is a man of great intelligence who's far above such feelings associated with love. Feelings which, if you ask me, have only proven to be one of, if not the, ultimate shortcoming to humankind. He plucked the green marker out of Wright Sheldon's hand, recapped it, and returned it to its rightful place on the aluminum ledge beneath the whiteboard. He then picked up the eraser and wiped away Wright Sheldon's brain picture. I will admit that I did find it quite charming and, dare I say, precious to see how much effort you placed into proving your silly little argument to me, said Left Sheldon, slapping down the eraser when he was finished. The drawing was a nice touch, albeit a pointless one, as if I need a reminder of how Amy looks. He wheeled the whiteboard across the room, back to its original spot, while Wright Sheldon stood there, his optimism draining, though only for a moment, as the laptop on Left Sheldon's desk managed to grab his attention. He stealthily looked back at Left Sheldon, who was still prattling on, and he casually strolled over to his desk. Anyway, said Left Sheldon, since I've just disproved your theory, I believe it's time for you to retire to your own room where you belong. You can go back to drawing your little sketches or whatever it is you do with your time, while I use my much more valuable time to— What do you think you're doing? Wright Sheldon shot upright. He'd been peering over his desk to read what Left Sheldon had written on his laptop. The latter rushed over to him, frazzled, while Wright Sheldon was now the calm and collected one. A sly, all-knowing smirk stretched across his face as he folded his arms over his chest. So, you've contracted acute indigestion, asked Wright Sheldon. Is that what you call it? Or is it, oh gosh, I don't know, perhaps a symptom associated with falling in love? No, don't be ridiculous, said Left Sheldon in a haste, his face reddening with anger. I'm not the one feeling anything of the sort. I always write from Sheldon's perspective. And so you wrote, the first sign of distress occurred this evening at about 9 o'clock. That happens to be right around the time Sheldon kissed Amy at the end of their date night, said Wright Sheldon. Yes, it certainly is, but that doesn't prove anything. Least of all that he's in love with her, spat Left Sheldon. It certainly proves that he's physically attracted to her, said Wright Sheldon, still refusing to break from this newly awakened, arrogant mood of his. Meanwhile, Left Sheldon was becoming increasingly aggravated. All it proves is that you've invaded my personal space and now my private records. Before you showed up here unannounced, I was in the middle of writing up a summary of tonight's events so that I could add it to my files cataloging Sheldon's memories. Ah, yes, I'm familiar with your files, said Wright Sheldon, who started walking towards the metal filing cabinets. Left Sheldon eyed him uneasily. What are you up to now? You claim Sheldon is incapable of expressing the human emotion of love because he's so smart that he's supposedly above such feelings. So let's explore that hypothesis for a moment using your records, shall we? Left Sheldon flinched at the sound of rattling metal as Right Sheldon pulled open one of the cabinets and started perusing the files dated in sequential order. When he found the document he was searching for, he pulled it out and cleared his throat, standing with perfect posture as he read from the file. Here we are. Sheldon once said to his best friend Leonard, and I quote, "I love you so much," said Right Sheldon. He promptly snapped the folder shut and slipped it back where it belonged. The only reason he said that was because he just inadvertently swallowed a bit of tequila. Leonard is his colleague, and he cherishes him like a brother, but he never actually say those words out loud. It was a one-time Freudian slip-up, protested Left Sheldon, but his counterpart was already pulling out another file. After Penny told Sheldon she loved having him in her life, he replied without hesitation, "I love you too," said Right Sheldon, closing the file as well and looking for another. "All right," said Left Sheldon, now beyond the point of aggravation. He huffed out a harsh breath, gathering his composure. "I get it. Sheldon is capable of loving people apart from his own flesh and blood. That still doesn't convince me that he loves Amy the way you think he does. Yes, he's quite fond of her. Yes, he values her opinion over everyone else's, because he not only respects her, but he sees her as his intellectual equal. None of that means he's in love with her. Now, will you please let this go?" "I can't, Lefty, don't you see?" said Right Sheldon with an exasperated air. "Contrary to what you so adamantly believe, those are all telltale signs that Sheldon has developed strong romantic feelings for Amy." Left Sheldon didn't miss a beat on that one. Sheldon doesn't believe in romance. Right Sheldon had a quick response as well. "Then why did he kiss Amy on the train?" "Don't say because he was trying to prove a point." "Because he was trying to prove a point," said Right Sheldon in a rush. He paused, growing upset, and placed his hands on his waist. Drat. "Well, that may have been the initial reason, but he ended up enjoying it just as much as she did, and you can't deny that." "I don't understand why you're harping on the physical side," said Left Sheldon. "That's all Amy seems to focus on as well. It's the major flaw in their otherwise amiable relationship." "Oh, that's hardly the issue at all," said Right Sheldon. "The real issue is Sheldon's attitude towards it. He feels Amy is pressuring him, when she's been nothing but patient with him. You want to know what the main problem is, the root of the friction between them? It's the simple fact that Sheldon is too selfish. He's unwilling to make sacrifices for Amy, to meet her needs, to let his emotional guard down with her. And you know why? Because he's scared of giving her more power and significance in his life than she already has. Therefore, the stronger his feelings for her become, the more he suppresses them." Left Sheldon stared at him, entirely silent. When finally he shook his head. "That's preposterous. I'll kindly ask you to leave now, as you've overstayed your welcome, not that you were welcome to begin with. Would you stop trying to get rid of me, Lefty? I'm right and you know it. Just admit it already. You know you want to." "I'll admit nothing," said Left Sheldon, and he gestured to the door with a wave of his hand, presenting the exit to him. "Now get out." "Not until you admit that Sheldon loves Amy," said Right Sheldon. "He doesn't love her." "Yes, he does." "Oh no, don't even start with me. I refuse to do that cliched back and forth bit." "No, he doesn't." "Yes, he does." Left Sheldon made a noise of disgust. "How utterly juvenile and contrived. As if I don't know that you're attempting to trick me into saying what you so desperately want me to admit. Well, sorry, Righty, but it's not going to work on me. You can try to convince me all you want, but whether you like it or not, I'm much smarter than you are. You think I don't know everything you've told me to be true? Obviously, Sheldon is attracted to Amy, both mentally and physically. Obviously, he enjoys being in her company more so than with anyone else. That's not to say she doesn't get under his skin at times, which she does, but it's a different way than it is with his family members or close friends. He thinks about her all the time, and she drives him crazy, and she's a remarkable human being, and of course he's in love with her!" Left Sheldon froze, astonished and overwhelmed, while Right Sheldon grinned devilishly and nodded his head. Alright, that was a portion of the left and right brain dichotomy. So again, that was before the episode aired when Sheldon told Amy he loved her in the prom equivalency. And I've written so many other shamey stories, but other Big Bang stories as well. I love the shamey. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, I thought I'd do something new. I'm going to be exclusively sharing personal stories. The topic? Sleepovers. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.